We are continuing our spring outlooks once again. I am so excited. We did on Tuesday South Carolina, Clemson, Alabama, and LSU. Now we're going to sit here and do all four Big Ten teams. How exciting, right? How exciting, covering our spring football coverage and continuing our spring football coverage, our spring outlooks for Pigskin Frenzy. We are going with the defending national champion, Ohio State. Its rival and counterpart, Michigan. A team that is familiar with both Michigan and Ohio State in Oregon, and another team that's familiar in the Big Ten, and that's Illinois. We have so much to talk about, loaded, jam-packed spring football and outlooks coverage right now here on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. I'm excited. I know you guys are, and I am so pumped and ready to go. With that being said, welcome to Pigskin Frenzy on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel Norris, and whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, listening on Podbean, you're listening on Apple, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Thursday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below, Spotify, Podbean, and Apple. All you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. Instagram at Pigskin_Frenzy. Follow up the pages there. You're going to get news and highlights from across college football, my thoughts on the game of football. You're going to get trivia questions on Instagram stories. Go and answer today's college football question as well as all things up to date for Pigskin Frenzy. There's the website, www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. There you can find all things up to date for Pigskin Frenzy. You can find a home and about me page, learn more about me as your podcast host. There is contact info down below. You can contact me down below. Name, email, question, answer. I'll give it, question, info, whatever. I'll answer it on air or off air if need be. There's the platforms page, all the platforms I just mentioned. Click on that page and it will click and you'll see which one's your favorite listening style of the show. There is also the store and affiliations page. More on that coming soon as we continue to update regularly the website for Pigskin Frenzy. That is www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. Let's get rolling. That was a quick promotional quick intro. I need to get more creative on these intros again. I apologize. I'm just so excited to talk about spring football from Pigskin Frenzy. We have a few more outlooks to give for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then as we get into April, we'll start giving all these results going into early May, and then we'll have more content and we'll move away from spring football because spring football will be over. But we just got a month and a half's worth of content for you guys, and episodes and podcast shows and shows in general of Pigskin Frenzy worth of spring outlook. So we need to talk about this because it's important, right? It's important to see about these teams and how good these teams can be in the year of our Lord 2025, heading into the season coming up this fall. We have the defending national champions on tap today. We're going to talk about Ohio State, the level of competition there, what's happening there. They did lose a lot, but they also have a lot of talent on that team this year. So we're going to pay attention and dive deep into that. We also have the outlooks on Michigan. We're also going to have the outlooks on Illinois, coming off of a Citrus Bowl win, surprisingly, against South Carolina, going 10 wins, probably the most wins they have had in quite some time. I'm about an hour out from Champaign, Illinois, by the way. So that one's exciting. It kind of is close to home, technically. And then you got Illinois, you got Oregon, the Oregon Ducks with Dan Lanning entering his third season, rather. Not even third season. He's entering his fourth season. It was 2022, 2023, and 2024. So his fourth season, rather, as Oregon's head coach, and he is entering a good environment. Got a quarterback battle going on. We're going to discuss that and dive deep into that and more on Pigskin Frenzy. Spring outlooks. We love our spring football. Thank you for tuning in, by the way, to this episode and tuning in to episode 207, because this is episode 207 of Pigskin Frenzy. Thanks for tuning in to 206. If you did not catch episode 206 on Tuesday, go back and listen to it. We talked about South Carolina, Clemson, Alabama, and LSU and their spring outlooks. In this one, we got 3 out of 4 that are playing their spring games, just like last time, and it's going to be interesting. So we're going to sit back, relax, and have fun. It's sort of a spring game, but the first one's a showcase. And without any further ado, Let's kick it off with Ohio State. The defending national champions, Ryan Day, is now a national champion. Everybody can get off of Ryan Day, okay? Everybody can get off of him. He is now a national champion, and he is ready to rock and roll. And he is now among three active national championship winners and head coaches. Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, and now Ryan Day. And he is ready to defend that championship and defend that title with a lot of young talent on this team. Leading the pack of it all is wide receiver Jeremiah Smith. You get Jeremiah Smith back, huge plus there. You also get wide receiver 2 Carnell Tate as well. Him and Tate are going to be forces to be reckoned with in the Big Ten. And the quarterback situation is a little bit, you think, okay, promising. You got Tavian St. Clair you just brought in from high school recruiting. He committed and signed with Ohio State. And then you got backing up, transferring from Alabama this past year and last year, before last year at least, was Julian Sayin. Julian Sayin is looking like he is going to be the starting quarterback for this Ohio State team going into 2025, and I'm going to be curious to see what he does. So coming off the heels of a dominant 12-team playoff run, national championship run, only losing to 2 teams. Losing to Oregon in the regular season and Michigan in the last game of the regular season. Both teams on who we're talking about here in just a little bit for this spring outlook. And Ohio State had a dominant run, built a whole roster. Watching their rivals, Michigan, win in 2023. Built a whole roster around it all, right? They built a whole roster there, and they said, you know what? We're going to win the national championship, or we're going to come close to winning the national championship. We're going to make a run. It's do or die. It's national title or bust, and, well, it was national title for them. They brought back all their guys like Jack Sawyer, JT, brought Caleb Downs in from the portal. They had Quinshawn Judkins come in from the portal. They brought back Trevion Henderson at running back. Emike Ibuka came in and returned as a super senior. They brought in and signed Jeremiah Smith from recruiting. Their class was to the nines on both portal and high school recruiting, and they brought it in this offseason. They brought this whole roster together with NIL packages and just completely built this roster up. And then they went on to dominate and win the national championship in the 12-team playoff. They brought in Will Howard from Kansas State, and he did well in the playoff run. They dominated Tennessee, ended up dominating Oregon in the Rose Bowl, ended up playing a close game against Texas, but beat them by 14 at the very end. And then in the first half, dominated Notre Dame, but ended up playing Notre Dame close at the very end because Notre Dame came back and showed some fight. But it was a great run for Ohio State to go on to win the national championship. And all those guys are gone. They did what they said they were going to do, win the national title, and now all those guys are gone. So who kind of steps up and replaces all these guys, right? So that's some of the key questions that we're asking heading into the spring football for Ohio State. For Ohio State, they do have a spring game here, and they do have a spring game coming up. Spring game is on April 12th, a spring game / spring showcase. It's a modified spring game, if you will. On April 12th, Ohio State, they have head coach Ryan Day, offensive coordinator, because they lost both their OC and DC. They lost both Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles went to Penn State, and then Chip Kelly went to the Las Vegas Raiders as the offensive coordinator there. They replace Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles with offensive coordinator promoting within Brian Hartline, the wide receivers coach as well, and defensive coordinator Matt Patricia from the Detroit Lions, the New England Patriots, the Philadelphia Eagles. He is a longtime NFL coordinator, is now going to college, and he is now the defensive coordinator for the Ohio State Buckeyes. So that's your staff for the 2025 season. Ryan Day as head coach, offensive coordinator Brian Hartline, and defensive coordinator Matt Patricia. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens heading into the 2025 season and this spring football. So let's go with our spring outlooks here for Ohio State, and let's talk about what I want to see from them in this spring. Number one, Julian Sayin replacing Will Howard. I want to see how he does and how he develops early on to get his first time and moment to shine as a starting quarterback for this Buckeyes team. He's got 2 great receivers that he's going to throw to. He's got Jeremiah Smith, who obviously will be the first receiver taken off the board in the 2027-2028 type class. You have, I thought, yeah, the 2027 NFL draft. 2026, he won't be into the 2027 NFL draft. I think he'll be the first wide receiver taken off the board, him and or Ryan Williams, but it's most likely going to be Jeremiah Smith. You got him, you got Carnell Tate, who is a great secondary receiver. I almost look at it like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals. You have Jeremiah Smith, who was like a Jamar Chase, and then you have Carnell Tate, like a T. Higgins, who you can throw to him, and he's just as reliable. So you got those two guys to throw to. The offensive line, you lost a little bit of the offensive line, but not too much. You still got some talent on the O-line. I'm curious to see how Julian Sayin develops with his decision-making, his accuracy, and just develops as a starting quarterback as a young player in such a big-time role after just coming off of a national championship. So I think it's a big thing to think about for Julian Sayin. It's a big thing to think about for these coaches in this spring. So I'm curious to see how Julian Sayin develops throughout this spring as the starting quarterback for this Buckeyes team. So that's what I want to see, is his development and how he progresses as QB1 for this team heading into the spring and 2025 season. That's number one. Number two, I want to see what the offense is going to look like now that Chip Kelly is gone. That was a good offense. Chip Kelly called some great plays, and he was a good play caller. He just wanted to call plays. Chip Kelly went from UCLA to Ohio State to be their OC. They ended up winning a national championship together. Chip Kelly just wanted to call some plays, and he did for that offense. That offense was top 5 in a lot of statistical categories per yardage, per game, each and every game throughout this season. I want to see if Brian Hartline can keep that trend. Brian Hartline was the offensive coordinator a couple of years back, and then Ryan Day took over the play calls, but then they got an offensive coordinator in there, and Brian Hartline, I guess, just wasn't ready. But now Ryan Day is confident and believes that, hey, Brian Hartline can call the plays, he is ready, and he's not only going to be the offensive coordinator, he'll still be the wide receivers coach. So he's the OC now, so we're going to see what he does and what kind of play calling and offensive schemes he's going to draw up for this team. Is it going to look just like Chip Kelly's, or is it going to be a tad bit different? What's it going to look like, and what's the offense going to look like under Brian Hartline in the spring, and how are they going to draw up plays and scheme everything up for this offense? I think that's number 2 that I want to see out of the spring for Ohio State. And then number 3, interesting enough, I want to see what this defense is going to look like schematically, and how the foundation is going to look like under this defense under Matt Patricia. Year 1 under Matt Patricia. They lost Jim Knowles to Penn State. In a lateral move, Jim Knowles goes to Penn State and takes about just a little bit about more money than what Ohio State was paying him at the time. And now they were looking for a DC. They brought in Matt Patricia from the NFL, a longtime NFL coordinator, Matt Patricia, who is now at Ohio State. So it's a very interesting move there. I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to work out on all facets of the defense, and I want to see what the scheme is, what the foundation is going to look like now that Matt Patricia is the defensive coordinator for Ohio State. So I'm curious to see how that's going to look and how the foundation is going to be set there, and that's what I'm wanting to see out of the spring. And what is their formation going to look like? Are they going to be just as physical as Jim Knowles? What's it going to look like, and how are they going to scheme up everything, and how that foundation in year 1 under Matt Patricia this spring and heading into the 2025 season. So that's what I want. That's my spring outlook on Ohio State and what I want to see. Number 1, the development of Julian Sayin early in this stage as he's getting ready to make a big start and big leap after winning a national title, and he's going to make a big leap as QB1 for this Ohio State team. So that's number 1. I've been hearing a lot of good things about him, especially at practice right now, and he's looking good, and I want to see if that hype is real. That's number 1. Number 2, what's the offense going to look like under Brian Hartline? How's the scheme going to look, and how's the playbook's going to look, and what's going to look different compared to Chip Kelly's offense? And number 3, same thing, but with a defense with Matt Patricia. How's it going to look different from Jim Knowles, or is it going to be the same? What's the foundation of that defense going to look like under Matt Patricia in year 1? That is Ohio State spring outlooks for us. April 12th is their spring showcase / spring game, modified spring game. We can't wait to see it. We will have spring results on Ohio State within the next few weeks on Pigskin Frenzy. That's Ohio State. And let's move on to their counterpart, because it's a very interesting story there for their counterpart, and that's Michigan. Their rival, the game, a team that Ohio State has not beaten in 4 years. I'm not trying to start anything. I'm sorry when I say that, but you have to be real. It's the truth. They have not beaten Michigan in 4 years. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to discuss what's going on in Ann Arbor for spring outlooks. They did not have because they lost a lot as well, didn't have the playoff run or wouldn't even come close to making to the Big Ten championship. They won about 8 games. They went 8-5 under Sharon Moore's first full year as head coach for the Michigan Wolverines, but they showed some promise at the very end. They beat Ohio State and then went to the Reliant Quest Bowl and beat Alabama again in the same calendar year. 2024 Rose Bowl, they beat Michigan, beat Alabama in the Rose Bowl in the playoffs. Then they end 2024 by beating the same team they knocked out in the playoff and to get to the national title for the 2023 year, which was Alabama. And it was a good year to end on and very, very good look for Sharon Moore as head coach. And now they did really, really well in recruiting, and they did really well in the transfer portal as well. So they loaded up on some talent heading into the 2025 season and this spring. So I'm curious to see what happens. The whole big story was Bryce Underwood decommitting and flipping from LSU to Michigan to stay home in Michigan. Sharon Moore and then brought the house with an NIL package that Bryce Underwood really could not refuse. I'm quoting The Godfather on that one. He made him an offer that he couldn't refuse, and Bryce Young did not refuse it. He ended up flipping, signing, and committing to Michigan, and now he is Michigan's quarterback, and Sharon Moore may have his guy, but that is one of our outlooks that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Michigan is ready to rock and roll. They got some talent on this team. They bring back head coach Sharon Moore, obviously. They also have a new offensive coordinator at the helm, and they hired him December 13, 2024 at Chip Lindsey. Offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey entering his first year as Michigan's offensive coordinator, and then they bring back defensive coordinator Wink Martindale. Don Wink Martindale is back for the defense. The defense was stingy last year, so that wasn't necessarily the problem. It was just the quarterbacks and moving the ball down the field and calling plays. Chip Lindsey's going to bring a more of a, finesse type style of play for this offense, and we cannot wait to see what scheme he brings to Michigan heading into the 2025 season and this spring. So without any further ado for Michigan, here's our outlooks for Michigan as we enter spring in the 2025 season. They're already practicing, so here we go. Their spring game is on April 19th. They will have a spring game. It's on April 19th on the Big Ten Network, and it will be televised as well. So spring outlook here for Michigan as they enter their spring game on April 19th, and that concludes on April 19th, their spring camp. So Michigan, without any further ado, number one for Michigan, and it's a very interesting case here. I want to see what the quarterback competition is going to look like, and will Bryce Underwood be a day one starter? Bryce Underwood and graduate transfer from Fresno State, Mikey Keene, will be the two mainly at the helm for this starting job. Will it be either Keene or will it be Underwood? I've been seeing a lot of good things about Underwood. He's looking almost as a freshman, like a veteran with his throws, his accuracy. I think decision making he's still playing like a freshman when it comes to decision making, but he will have to shape up a little bit, and then he will have some time to clean that up heading into fall. Can he win the starting job? And I want to see if he can do it by cleaning some of that stuff up and some of those freshman mentality up. He's going to have some freshman moments in games. Don't get me wrong if he plays, but can he be that guy for Michigan, and can he win the starting job? And is Mikey Keene, or is he going to outshadow him in for Michigan's starting job as well? What's the competition going to look like? Who's going to get a leg up in Michigan's quarterback battle? I'm curious to see how that's going to look there. Number two, the receiving room. What's the receiving room going to look like? Samaj Morgan and Fred Moore are two guys that are solid, but really haven't stood out as go-to receivers this past season and heading into spring. They're doing okay, but are they the go-to guys, or are they just wide receiver 3 or 4? Who knows? Can they step up, and what's the receiving room, going to look like? What's it going to look like? I mean, like I said, you got more, as I'm pulling up my notes here on the cellular device. You have you have guys like Donovan McCulley, 6'5" wide receiver. he was on an Indiana football team that was not the best, but he was a bright spot of that Indiana football team a couple of years ago. Anthony Simpson at UMass, he did really, really good at he did really, really good. And there's some important pass catchers there, who could be that help for Bryce Underwood or Mikey Keene, whoever they throw to. So what's the receiving and what's the pass catching going to look like in this spring? And I'm curious to see if Samaj Morgan and Fred Moore can also kind of, keep up really and shape up, right? And can they develop as clear go-to guys for Bryce Underwood throwing to him or Mikey Keene throwing to him? So let's see there. That's number 2 for me on Michigan is the pass catching. Number 3, the offensive scheme for Chip Lindsey. What's that going to look like? How's the foundation of the offense going to look like under Michigan? Are they going to be more fast-paced? I'm not worried about the running game. I'm really, really high on Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall being the rotation for the running game for this team. I think those two running backs are going to be solid for Michigan. I think they have a potential to be the best 1-2 punch in the Big Ten besides, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen from Penn State. I'm curious to see how it's going to look, and I'm really curious to see how the offense overall is going to look under Chip Lindsey. So I'm curious to see what the foundation is going to look like and the scheme of things heading into the spring. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing this spring and throughout the spring until April 19th. So that's my spring outlooks on Michigan and what the Maize and Blue are going to do and the Wolverines are going to do. Number 1, the quarterback competition. Who's going to step up and take that leap in the quarterback competition? What's it going to look like with the pass catching and who's going to step up at the receiving core and the tight end spots? And number 3, what's the offensive foundation going to look like in year 1 under Chip Lindsey heading into the fall, but also during this spring? I think that's what I'm curious about. Those 3 things for the Michigan Wolverines. Their spring games on the Big Ten Network, April 19th. Watch it, tune into it, and see your Wolverines and look out for them and see how they are doing in the spring heading in to the 2025 season. So that was Michigan's spring outlook. And there's another team that is, trying to get back and still, really maintain that Big Ten prowess and stride. They are the defending Big Ten champions and were the number 1 seed in the college ball playoff last year. That's the Oregon Ducks. Went undefeated up until the Rose Bowl, lost to the eventual national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, and Oregon is back and ready to go in the spring. Dan Lanning entering his 4th year as Oregon Ducks head coach. He's ready to rock and roll. No Dylan Gabriel. You lose Dylan Gabriel. That's a key outlook that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. They lose Dylan Gabriel. Had a fantastic pro day. He's getting ready to go to the NFL and get drafted. I'm curious to see what happens there and what goes down with the Oregon Ducks heading into this spring. So you got that, right? You had a fantastic season, come off the heels of a great season, go all the way to the Big Ten title game and win the Big Ten championship in your first season. Dan Lanning, a conference champion in his first season in the Big Ten. He's excited. He's ready to rock and roll. And then you lose to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl in bad fashion in the college ball playoff. Bummer. It is. It's a bummer. But the way Oregon builds in the transfer portal, in recruiting, they're a powerhouse, and they're turning in to a powerhouse, and it's a team that you just have to watch out for, right? If you're the Oregon Ducks, you just got to watch out for them. It's very, very interesting. I'm curious to see what Oregon does heading in to the 2025 season and spring. So without any further ado, let's give us our outlooks on the Oregon Ducks. So the Oregon Ducks for me in the spring here for the Oregon Ducks is this. Number 1, the quarterback competition. Dante Moore should be really, if you want to be real, the number 1 guy for Oregon heading in, right? Number 1 is Dante Moore. You got Dante Moore. You got Austin Novoosad as for the starting job. Both of those 2 guys are because they're going through the young quarterback growing pains in practice right now. They're doing good, but they're not doing great. They're going through the growing pains. And that's what every young quarterback who hadn't played a lot, it's going to go through. And Nova Osad and Dante Moore are the two guys battling for the job. It's looking like Dante Moore may take that job, but I'm going to be curious to see what happens in the spring and what Dan Lanning's going to see. Those are the two replacements for Dylan Gabriel, and we're going to see what happens there. So what's the quarterback competition going to look like? Who's going to take that leap, and what's going to happen there for the Oregon Ducks heading into the fall, but also around spring, right? So I'm curious to see what happens there for the Oregon Ducks, right? So that's number one. What's going to take? What's the leap's going to look like in the quarterback spot here? So that's number one. Number two for Oregon, and I'm curious to see about this also, the offensive line. I mean, the offensive line, developing and having more depth on the offensive line, it's very enticing. The addition of, they had three portal O linemen in this transfer portal after 4 starters left, and it's literally just kind of, trying to get the trenches cleared up and trying to get the trenches and the line of scrimmage built up for that ball, because a lot of ball, I mean, how Dan Lanning likes to play, he likes to be physical on the line of scrimmage and play physical football. And that's how you're going to do it. You're going to have to go into the portal and recruit some good guys and clean up and get and bolster up that offensive line or D line, right? So what's it going to look like? The Ducks have David Lully, Kawakio Rogers, and you have also Matthew Bedford, all guys there for the Oregon Ducks. What's it going to look like for them? You have 3 guys at right guard that can make an impact, and it's going to be interesting because that right guard spot is a key battle for the Oregon Ducks. I'm curious to see what that's going to look like there. I'm curious to see what the offensive line is going to look like and how are they going to look a lot better than what they did late last season. I think late last season, especially in that Ohio State Rose Bowl playoff game, that's when the line started acting up. I'm curious to see if they have any, really kind of itch towards that and try to get that cleaned up and try to get everything good in the trenches so they can play some physical football like Dan Lanning likes to play at Oregon. So number 2, how are they going to get the offensive line cleared up? And I want to see what they do on the O-line, especially at that right guard spot, especially with those 3 guys that I just named. Number 2, the defensive line as well. What's the defensive line going to look like? How is that going to look like on that side of the football? And what's it going to look like, physically up there? So you brought in some guys in the portal. You have Bear Alexander from Georgia, and you have Bear Alexander from USC. They transfer from USC and Georgia coming into Oregon, and he is going to be on the D-line for Dan Lanning. That's an interesting big-time pickup on the D-line. Who can help out, on the D-line for the Oregon Ducks? Curious to see that, right? I'm curious to see who can help out on the D-line besides just Bear Alexander. I'm going to, hopefully get my notes right in ready here, but what's it going to look like on the D-line? I'm curious to see if they can bring that physicality just like Dan Lanning likes to bring, and just like, he wants on the offensive line. I want to see it on the defensive line, right? What's that going to look like? You got Bear Alexander. You have on the D-line, Gavin Nix, who can come in as a freshman inside linebacker that can play a hybrid on the edge. You still got Mateo Uiagalelei, DJ's family member and relative, Mateo Uiagalelei. You got him at the outside linebacker who can play hybrid edge and bring him on there as well. But if you're talking about just pure defensive line, you got Aiden Breland, redshirt freshman coming into Oregon. He can help out on the defensive line as well. You just got to bolster up that defensive line again. Tyon Gray, defensive line, another redshirt freshman. You got Amari Washington also. That's another one. Amari Washington as a junior, he can be a good threat alongside Bear Alexander just to bolster up that defensive line. Guys like that to help out that D-line and to get everything settled and be physical right ahead of the 2025 season in spring. So those are the 3 things that I would really want to see out of Oregon this spring. Number 1, what's that quarterback battle going to look like between Dante Moore and Austin Navasad? And then you also got the offensive line. What's it going to look like? How you're going to bolster up that and fix everything and clean everything up in the trenches there. And then the third thing is the same thing, but vice versa with the defensive line. How are you going to bolster up that defensive line? You got Bear Alexander, you got Amari Washington. How is that going to look up there and bolster up that line and make it more physical going into the 2025 season and spring? Oregon has head coach Dan Lanning, offensive coordinator Will Stein, and defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoy. Spring games April 26th, late April, early going into May, almost the last Saturday of, or going to be the last Saturday almost of April, right? So April there, you got that there. Excuse me, last Saturday of April, Oregon spring game, can't miss it. And they are going to have a spring game there in April 26th. Do not miss it. Catch it and watch your Ducks and see how they develop in the spring. And we will get spring results out of them here and in the next few weeks and have it on Pigskin Frenzy. Let's talk about one more, and it's an interesting one that I've been wanting to talk about to conclude today's episode and Thursday's episode of Pigskin Frenzy. We are talking about the Fighting Illini of Illinois. And I am interested to hear about this one because I'm fired up about Illinois. I am. I really am. I'm fired up about Illinois. I am ready to talk about some Illini football because they had a great season last year. I said I was going to do a spring outlook on Illinois because I think it's very interesting to see how they're going to come in and try to, rebound and kind of like go after this season after they had such a good season and won 10-plus games last year. They ended it with a solid Citrus Bowl win against South Carolina and went 10-3. They lost to Oregon. They lost to Penn State. And I'm trying to think who else they lost if I don't remember right. They lost somebody else. I just don't. It's coming out, and I just don't know who. Anyway, they lost to Penn State. They lost to Oregon as well. They lost to three really good teams, and other than that, they beat everybody else, and Illinois looked good. And it's one of those things where you're looking at them and you're like, okay, well, let's see how they can rebound and bounce back after winning 10-plus games and capping it off with a Citrus Bowl win. You got Luke Altmaier back at quarterback, and I am curious to see what happens there and how he looks. For the Illini. I think he did really, really good last year. I want to see if he develops quite more and takes that next step to probably to surprise a lot of people and could be that key factor and they could even make a surprise run at a Big Ten championship. Can he be that guy? Luke Altmaier did really, really well last year. Can he take that next step and just be even better? I want to see that. I want to see if he can get over that leap and do that. So that's my number one outlook. My number one outlook is, can Luke Altmaier take that next step? I want to see if he can do that this spring. That's my number one outlook on Illinois. Can he do that this spring? And can he take that next leap and just go forward and become that championship level minded quarterback that the Illini is looking for? So he's a redshirt senior entering his final year. Can he be that guy for the Illini? That's one for me. I want to see about, because they got a lot of guys coming back. I want to see, honestly, how some of these young players are going to do on this offense. And you're going to think, really, that's an interesting outlook there. Yeah, I want to see how these young players are going to look for the Illini, and that's my second outlook for them. How are these young players going to look? I want to see how Amar Reynolds, redshirt freshman, their defensive back, because they need to have to bolster up their defensive backs a little bit. Amar Reynolds, I want to see how they look and how he looks entering his first year as a Fighting Illini. 6 foot, 180 pounds as a defensive back. I want to see how he looks. I want to see how Braden Trimble looks from Mount Zion, Illinois, 6'1", 175 pounds, freshman out of Mount Zion, Illinois. I want to see how he looks in the offense and see if they can get him going in the offense. They got a lot of guys who are veteran-minded guys. They're bringing back a lot of talent on this team, and it's going to pretty much be the same team as it was last year that won the 10-plus games. But I still want to see how, like I said, how these younger guys look, like a Braden Trimble, like a Amar Reynolds. One more at the defensive back side of things, Azani Scott, freshman out of Riviera Beach, Florida. Defensive back, 5'11", 180 175 pounds. I want to see how he looks heading in as a Fighting Illini for Illinois. So that's my second outlook. How are these young players going to step up into the mold and find a role within this season and beyond for this team? So that's number two. How are these young players going to step up for this Illini team? And this is kind of going into the defensive backs. Number three, what are the secondary going to look like? You got loads of talent at the secondary. I want to see how promising they can be, and I want to see what they can do. Xavier Scott, senior, coming back, 5'11", 190 pounds, out of Rivera Beach, Florida. Xavier Scott, still there, senior for Illinois. He will most likely start. What about the younger guys like Andre Lovett Jr., freshman, the guys I just mentioned, like Amar Reynolds, redshirt freshman out of Fort Pierce, Florida? I want to see how those guys look in the secondary. You got guys, you got guys like Miles Scott coming back, obviously. Miles Scott coming back at senior, Dalton, Illinois. I want to see how he looks, 5'11", 210 pounds. I want to see how the secondary looks for Illinois and how they can, make a huge impact in the spring. So those are mainly the three things that I want to see out of the Fighting Illini of Illinois. Number one, the championship next leap for Luke Altmaier. Can he make that leap to be a championship quarterback for this team? Number two, what are these young players going to do on this team, and how are they going to step up for this Illinois team? And then number three, how's the secondary going to make an impact? And some of the names that are coming back, they have a shot at making an impact and being probably the best position on this team for Illinois. I want to see if they can step up and bolster up and be good heading into the spring and making that impact and being that top position level for this team in the spring and heading into the 2025 season. That's what I want to see out of Illinois heading into this spring. By the way, for Illinois, there is no spring game. Illinois has no spring game. They kicked off their practice March 13th. Everything's going well for Illinois. They look fired up and ready to come back for the fall of 2025. Everything looks good there. There's no spring game for them. Brett Bielema made that very adamant. They are, for now on, are going by a year-to-year basis on deciding if they will have a spring game. But this year, there will be no spring game for the camp. Head coach Brett Bielema, offensive coordinator Barry Looney Jr., and defensive coordinator Aaron Henry, all back, and majority of their roster is back in the Big Ten. So watch out for Illinois. They're looking good in the spring so far. I'm curious to see about those three things for our spring outlooks for the Fighting Illini of Illinois. That was Ohio State spring outlooks, Michigan spring outlook, Oregon spring outlook, and Illinois spring outlook. We are out of time for Pigskin Frenzy today. Guys, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Thursday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me and some spring football coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple. All you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. X and Instagram, at Pigskin_Frenzy. Follow the pages there. Go to my channels there. Joel Norris is the name, at Pigskin_Frenzy. You'll find news and highlights from across college football. You will find trivia questions on Instagram stories. Go and answer today's college football question, as well as exclusive content, reels, and more, and post on the game of college football and more on Pigskin Frenzy on Instagram and X. There's the website, www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. Go check out our things, all things today for Pigskin Frenzy there as well. Guys, big thank you for taking some time out of your Thursday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football and spring football coverage presented by me. We will be back Tuesday, episode 208 Tuesday. We have a group of 5 edition of Spring Outlooks coming your way. We are going to talk about Boise State, Tulane, UNLV, and Memphis. The 4 schools that we're talking about Tuesday, group of 5 edition of Spring Outlooks. Boise State, Tulane, UNLV, and Memphis. How are they going to do heading into the spring? And we're going to give you our outlooks on them heading into the spring. And until Tuesday's edition of Pigskin Frenzy, guys, I am Joel Norris, signing off. We love you all. If you want to come to know the Lord Jesus, because we could not be doing this show without Jesus, our Lord and Savior. We pray for everybody, and we love everybody, and we want everybody to come to know Jesus, and you want to come to know Jesus and are thinking about and have that thing in your heart, they're just calling you, right, to just come to know Jesus, contact me on my website, www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. Contact me on my X and Instagram at pigskin_frenzy, and we will talk to you about coming to know Jesus, our Lord and Savior. We cannot do this without him. We love him. Without him, we wouldn't have this platform to do this show on and spread the good news of Jesus at the end of each episode. For it's all for his glory, right? So we praise him and blessing and thank him for blessing us with this platform. We love you all, Jesus. We love you all. We are praying for you all. As always, stay the course.